think we can make a start. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. So my name is Kieran Stevens, and on behalf of Williams Medical, I'd just like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this webinar on commercial resilience in an age of uncertainty. This webinar is the first in our new practice support series and is presented in partnership with the Institute of Health and Social Care Management. We're delighted to welcome John Wilks, Chief Executive Officer of the Institute of Health and Social Care Management today. So thanks for joining us, John. I'm sure you'll introduce yourself in a second. Just a couple of bits in terms of housekeeping. So this webinar is scheduled for 1 hour. Throughout the session, we'll have plenty of time for questions. So we'd like to invite your comments and your questions throughout the session. So if you do have a question, please use the chat function. As I said, this should just be at the top of your screen. And yeah, we'll work through them throughout the session, and there'll also be some time at the end as well. This session will be recorded and will be available on our platforms shortly after the session. We'll also include some useful resources in our post-event communication. So, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to John to start the session.
Oh, thank you, Kieran. Hello, everybody. Lovely to have you with us today. As Kieran said, this is scheduled for an hour. I thought we might look at the topic for about 40 minutes in terms of a more formal presentation from me. And then we'll go over to Q&A and so on and address any specific challenges or questions any of you may have. Could I just make one really important point as well right at the beginning before I start sharing my slide screens and so on? I well appreciate that the financial picture is extremely tough right across the NHS at present. In primary care, you're no different. Some of you may be distinctly anxious about the current circumstances surrounding your practice and surrounding your staff and that kind of stuff. Please, if that's the case and you would like some confidential conversation subsequent to this afternoon's webinar, I will put up my details, and I would encourage you, if you would like to have a confidential chat with me, we've got some fantastic resources to help people who are struggling, and we'd be very happy to introduce you to that. So I just wanted to put that right out there at the moment. There's an empathy and understanding, certainly from my perspective and certainly from Williams Medical's perspective, around what you're up to at present, and we'll perhaps tackle that in a bit of detail. But you're not on your own, and you've got plenty of support should you require it. Okay, in that regard, allow me now to share my screen, and I hope you can all see that now. You can see that's the holding screen. So I'm going to go into this commercial resilience in an age of uncertainty, and I want to go straight in here, because if any of you are on this call by mistake wondering, what do you mean by uncertainty, John? Well, I think it's fair to say that any of these photographs might address that issue. We've obviously got Trump's tariffs, which has caused mayhem in the supply chain, and the idea that somehow the medical sector is exempt from that is ludicrous. Certainly the British pharmaceutical industry has got significant concerns. Certainly some of your equipment suppliers to Williams Medical, and therefore on to you, will have concerns about that. So I think that the Trump tariff thing is clearly creating some uncertainty. I make no apology for putting up the picture of the Chancellor of the Exchequer. I'm not going to be political in this regard today at all, but it is worth pointing out that as soon as the Chancellor of the Exchequer takes power and instantly starts talking about a £22 billion black hole, it's quite clear where the direction of travel is in respect of government policy and focus on cost cutting, etc., to try to redress that. And I think that's really led a lot of what Sir Keir Starmer has been talking about as Prime Minister in respect of trying to scrap NHS England and the chaos that that is manifestly already creating. And if you still weren't convinced about it, well, we've got Wes Streeting, the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, whose job is on the line. If you think about it, he's probably got about 3 years to actually get the situation under control in respect of wait lists. The general public, I don't think, are particularly interested in the financial situation. What they are interested in is the wait list situation. And I think a lot of the situation that many of you will be finding yourself in is driven right now by a recipe involving all of those 4 factors that I've tried to represent through the photography above here. Okay, let's move along, if I may. If we're talking uncertainty, well, that's a photograph of Cheltenham. And that was taken last year, but I was interested in this year because you may think there's such a thing as a racing certainty. No, there isn't. So that's jockey of Constitution Hill at this year's Cheltenham Festival. Constitution Hill went off as an odds-on favourite. Everybody was piling in, and it fell at about the 9th fence, I think it was, and the jockey ended up on the deck, and the bookies celebrated like it was a second Christmas, to be quite honest with you. I think it's worth us thinking about this horse racing analogy in respect of uncertainty and telling yourself, detailing to yourself the idea that whatever you may be thinking for the future, the idea that there is any kind of certainty built in at the moment is a non-starter. My view is, and I'm running the Institute on this basis at the moment as well, is nothing is a given. Everything that you are predicting, you've got to have plans and processes in place so that if it doesn't happen, you can quickly move position and so on, and segue to a different cost structure or a different growth mindset. So I just think it's important for us to lay that myth to rest right now. There is no such thing as certainty in this market at present, and it is a market. And I think we do well to address that. There's one or two other things that are going on in the background that rather play to that as well. So this is a chart produced by the BMA. This is showing GPs of different types and what's been going on since around 2015 in respect of GP practices. This is a quarterly measurement that they create. And you can see, if I may, in the dark blue, this is the number of partners which is continuing to decline. And we know, if you look at what the BMA and the King's Fund and others are saying, we know that that partnership model is going to continue to decline. Many are predicting that it will decline more acutely as the effect of age demographics comes in, and the modern GP doesn't really have any great aspirations for a partnership model, which is why you can see the salaried mode starting to expand quite quickly. Okay, in that regard, there is already therefore uncertainty in respect of what's the future of a partnership model, and if that's going to start to erode still further, how is primary care going to present itself to the citizens that it serves? And then the other thing that will not be far from any of your minds, of course, is the new GP contract for 25-26. This is a slide I've taken from the King's Fund's explanation of it. By the way, if you would like to learn more about that, I would recommend this. This is a fantastic read that the King's Fund have pulled together. But of course, the GP contract for 25-26 is still not fully agreed. So further uncertainty in that regard. And here we are at the end of April, coming into May. We know from work that we've done in primary care with various different people that last year and even the year before, several practices reported having to wait months into the new financial year before they had their budgets confirmed and so on. And we know, certainly in the case of a couple of Welsh practices, they didn't even get it confirmed until the 12th month, i.e. March of the financial year in which they were operating. Just imagine that for a moment. And some of you may well have experienced something of that nature. Okay, so I suppose what this means is we have the opportunity for change here. And I think what we would want to start with today is to talk about how do any of you manage change should you be required to start to change the modus operandi of your practice, or start to change the way that you interact with your patient base, how you choose to interact with your fellow practices in your local area, how you choose to interact with your ICB and such like. And I don't know whether any of you are familiar with this. This is a chart that has been it's been quite popular lately because Simon Sinek has started to use it. It was actually through a researcher back in the 1950s who came up with this. But this is a change management bell curve. And it's interesting. So let me just quickly take you through it, just in case any of you do not know quite what I'm referring to here. So what the bell curve is saying that is, if you want to create an environment of change, if you want to persuade a group of people from going and doing things one way to doing it another way, you should take careful attention to this bell curve. So what you typically find is in any organization, any team, any GP practice, for example, you're going to have about 2.5% of the people whom you are trying to change who you would regard as innovators. These are your go-to folks who you know pretty well will support pretty much anything that you suggest. They won't ask a whole heap of questions. They're not particularly risk averse. They believe in you and trust you, and they will just, if you say, stop doing it like that, start doing it like this, you'll have about 2.5% of people who say, yeah, sure, no problem, we'll start tomorrow. Okay. After that, you'll get into the early adopters. These are people who will typically wait to make sure that nothing happens that's adverse to the innovators before they come in. They are slightly more risk averse than the innovators, but they're still very positive individuals. As soon as they see the merit of what you're asking them to do, they will come straight in. They will be followed then by the early majority. These are people who are even more risk averse. They're waiting to make certain that they're not going to get scalded by whatever's being proposed. And as soon as they see the innovators and early adopters are having a positive experience of what's being proposed, they come in. It will not have escaped any of your attention because you're all super bright people. But if you add up 2.5, 13.5 and 34, you get to the magic 50% number. So that's your first port of call. It's to get to that magic tipping point, you might describe it as, and understand that from then on, you should be able to make whatever change you're proposing stick. The late majority are driven predominantly by FOMO, fear of missing out. So they will come in once they realize that actually this is a good thing, it's having positive effects, and they don't want to miss the boat. And you will always have this 16% of people who are labeled as laggards. It doesn't mean that they're bad people. It just means they are more risk averse or have more anxieties about what you are proposing in this particular situation than the others. The mistake, therefore, that we typically try to make if we're leading an organization, or if you as practice manager are trying to lead your practice, or you're trying to persuade your patient groups to start doing things a different way, interacting with you in a different way, is we try to do the whole change to everybody, whoosh, in one go. The NHS is fantastic at this, by the way, particularly in the acute sector. We try to persuade everybody to just do what we're proposing now and mistakenly expect everybody to go, what a super idea, I'm all in. As you can see from this, nothing is really more further from the truth, okay? If you adopt a tactic, a strategy, whereby you identify and engage with your innovators and early adopters first, convince them of the merit of it, and then start to get cracking with the change, you will have a much more productive experience. By the way, if anybody has any questions as I go through this sort of stuff, please type them in the chat. I am monitoring that periodically. So if you've got anything that you particularly like to address, then I will try to deal with that as we go along. I think there's a lot of stuff talked about change management and how we might respond to situations that require our organizations to do things differently. I could try to take you through a whole heap of really quite complicated theory. I'm not going to because I don't think we've got time for it today, and I don't think that's necessarily your absolute focus and reason for why you're on the call today. What I will do is take you through a model that we're quite fond of within the Institute of Health and Social Care Management, which is our PBP model. So we would suggest to you that if you are trying to persuade a group of people to make change at any level of that bell curve, then what you need to address is PBP. These are 3 specific levers that you need to pull, and you will need to pull all 3 in order to make some kind of meaningful change. So would any of you like to use the chat to perhaps suggest to me what you think the first P might stand for? So if we're trying to persuade a group of people to change from doing things one way to doing things another way, what's the first thing that we need to present them with? I will keep a lookout. If nobody replies, I'm just going to have to tell you, because that's the only way this can possibly work. Well, Veronica, thank you very much for having a go. I'd have said plan if I was in your shoes. It's not quite what I was looking for, but you will understand why in a moment or two. Make it even more fundamental than that. It's something that they might receive if they do this and they're successful with it. What will they get? Pay. Very good, Jenny. Yeah, pay. There's partly. I'll tell you, I'll put you out of your misery. Here you go. It's prize. So what we explain to them is, if you do this and we do it positively and productively and effectively, this is the prize that we will receive for doing so. Typically, you're not wrong. It could be pay, it could be praise, it could be profit, it could be all manner of different things. But that prize has got to be appealing enough to the people you are trying to persuade to change, where they get excited at the prospect of doing what you're asking. In other words, it's a trophy basically that you're offering them. If they do this, this is theirs, and they're so excited about that that you pique their interest. Okay. If we've piqued their interest and we've now got a significant people interested enough to want to learn more, we may well put a plan in front of them and that kind of stuff. But sooner or later, we're going to have to address this B lever. Anybody, any idea what that might be referring to? It's instilling a sense of really help me here. Thank you very much, Jenny. Well done, everybody. Belief. It's this idea that however grand your plan, you may think your plan is, however attractive the prize is, if we don't help your people who you are trying to persuade to change, to believe that what you're asking them to do is completely achievable and that they will have the resources, time, support, etc., that they're requiring in order to do it, then we are wasting our time. They will not, however attractive the prize may be, unless you are able to convince them that what you're asking them to do can be done, they just won't come in. Okay. Often, if we're going to do the belief thing, we've really got to open our ears and listen to the litany of anxieties, challenges, etc., that they're going to come out with when you propose the change in the first place. You've got to be seen to go away and do something about those anxieties, challenges, obstacles, etc. Erica says what that prize needs to be will be different for different people. Maybe. Sometimes that's the case. But remember that bell curve. So you wouldn't try to necessarily make the same prize for everybody on that bell curve, but you start with something that you think your innovators and early adopters would find attractive in the first place. Okay. It's often, in my experience, the best prize is how we're going to make the people who we serve, feel if we do this. And that needs to be a positive change. I hope that makes sense, Erica. Okay. And then finally, we're going to have to apply something. Anybody, any idea what the final P might be? We're going to have to apply something to actually get a few people to actually have a go at this. Starts with P. It's applying. Work with me here, people. Thank you very much, Jenny. Good pressure. Amanda, congratulations. Down in Fowey, beautiful part of the world. It's pressure. We have to apply some pressure, typically to our innovators and early adopters, to get them to go. Once they're going with it, once they're having a positive experience of it, we start to put a bit of pressure on that early majority and so on. We move along that bell curve. And what you should find is, as those first people get a positive experience of what you're asking them to do, they in turn will start to create some peer pressure for the people who have not yet come on board. Does this all make sense? Hope so. Okay. So I thought that might be worth talking to you, because it strikes me that one of the challenges we're going to have if we're trying to be resilient in an environment where there is huge uncertainty and so on, it's that sooner or later you are going to have to change elements of what you do and the way that you do it. And that could apply to a whole heap of different things, but sooner or later you're going to do it. If you need some reassurance that this prize, belief, pressure thing applies, well, I thought I might give you a case study. Okay, this is probably the biggest single change in my lifetime that I've seen outside of something like a mobile phone and mobile technology. The biggest change that I've seen, I think, well, here we are. It's smoking in public places. And certainly when I was a young man, I'm not saying it necessarily looked in black and white when I was a young man, but you would go to the pub and you would come back reeking of cigarette smoke, even if you did not smoke yourself. And believe it or not, anybody any idea when the smoking ban in public places came in and young people like this could go to the pub and just eat crisps and that kind of stuff without smoking? Anybody any idea what year? You'll be astonished when I tell you. Oh, I tell you what, Daryl, good for you. Yeah, you see, Jenny, you and I, we're the same. We thought it was years earlier, 2007. Isn't that extraordinary? I know it's making some of you feel a bit old now. I get that. But yeah, 2007, when the smoking ban in public places first came in. So you might be thinking to yourself, how does prize, belief, pressure work in respect of helping people to decide that they no need to anymore to be slave to their packet of cigarettes, but actually we might start to think about quitting. So the prize that the government of the day presented to people and families of people who were smokers and so on presented to their loved ones was, you're going to get fitter, you're going to feel more vitality, you're going to live longer, it's going to be a better experience for everybody. It's that kind of, you're going to do jogging, park runs and that kind of stuff and get yourself where you feel more revitalized. Does that make sense? That's your prize. You'll feel better, you'll live longer, everybody will have a better experience. The belief then, well, I got a photo here from, this is NHS in Lancashire. You can quit in Lancashire. You're 4 times more likely to stop smoking with our help. For further details, please call. It's the Quit Squad that they introduced over there. Many of you will still have smoking cessation clinics in your practices, I suspect. I think it's still a QOF initiative. But do you understand what I'm driving at in getting into people's head the idea that you're not on your own, you'll be supported, you'll be helped, we can help you do this. However difficult you may find that process, there's enough help and support to help you with this. And then finally, of course, the pressure was in the government obliging cigarette companies to put these rather unpleasant pictures on, and now even, they're behind screens in retailers and so on. I'm just trying to give you an example of prize, belief, pressure. This is how it works in real time, and that's a manifestation of it, the smoking cessation activity. Okay, any questions there, or shall we move on? Because the next thing I want to talk to you about, it's probably the most difficult thing to actually get people to do in an environment where telling oneself the truth is a really difficult thing for us to try to absorb. So I want to take you to, I hope you can all see this. It's not important for you to see every single figure here, but I want to talk to you about how we do cash flow. Okay, and I have made this up. This is, as you can see from the numbers involved, but I've tried to orientate it to primary care, and I've tried to orientate it to the realities of telling oneself the truth when we are dealing with cash flow. I'm afraid to say that the truth is that quite often businesses, organizations fall into difficulty when, for whatever reason, they appear to be incapable of addressing things like cash flow with absolute honesty in their heart. They try to kid themselves that things will be okay, and they run into all sorts of unforeseen difficulties because they're not prepared to face the reality of the difficulty that they may be in. So I hope you can see this. I started off, this is a 6 monthly cash flow. It's it'd be familiar to many of you who work in finance and so on. But what you would do, I've just nominally started with a £50,000 cash balance for this particular imaginary practice. I've said, well, look, let's look at income first of all. So I've got list-based contract, whether you are GMS, PMS or APMS, you'll have some kind of list-based contract revenue that you would bring in. You'll have your quaff revenue that you would expect, and then you'll have other stuff that could be in respect of enhanced services, local services, additional services, whatever. Okay. And what I've done is I've assumed there, right, probably £100,000 a month. And don't hold me to this. I know that you'll be dealing with completely different numbers, but just from the point of view of showing you how this might work, I think it's important. All of a sudden, you can see I've put in 80,000 there in August. Anybody got any idea why I might have gone suddenly to 80, and why in quaff we might go to 35 in September? You are welcome to have a deduction here. It's a bit like Sherlock Holmes. I get this. Quarterly uplift. That's an interesting one. It could be that, Berenica. Could be. Not quite what I'd got in mind here. So what I'm proposing here is, let's say you are a practice in a relatively small market town, and all of a sudden the local authority have announced 4 or 5 years ago, here we go, Berenica, increased list size. There's going to be a new estate built on the edge of your town, something like 500, 600 new homes built, affordable housing, family housing, that kind of stuff. And the ICB have acknowledged in their budget preparations, discussions with you, that that's going to come along, and probably that's going to start to hit. So your list size will start to increase from around about August. You build that into your activity. Do you get the idea? Sure, you understand what I'm driving at there. The reason that quaff comes in the month after is potentially you realize there's an opportunity for earn more from the contract that you've got created. What have we done here then in the expenditure? Well, you can see I've decided that we're probably going to need some more staff to look after the fact that we've got an enhanced population on our doorstep now. So let's stick that up by £10,000. And then let's think to ourselves, well, we're probably going to need to pay our contractors a little bit more to bring them on board. There may be the need for further locum activity, etc. And there may be, therefore, the requirement for more fixed costs. Does this all make sense? This should be straightforward. I don't know how many of you do cash flow forecasting, but this is how you would ordinarily do it. Okay. All of these numbers are live. That is to say, if I changed one of them, then it would instantly flutter down to the bottom line here, which is your net cash balance that you're seeking to maintain, so that you know you've got X months of available money to be able to pay salaries, honour commitments, contractually and otherwise, etc., buy equipment, invest in digital, etc. You can see in the digital zone here, I said £14,000 in July, because we're going to have a new system to support our electronic patient records and so on. Do you get the idea? So that's how you might do it. The key is, of course, all of this has to be based on the truth. If you don't know that you're going to get £80,000, a £20,000 uplift in August, then you should not be putting it anywhere near your cash flow forecast. Get the idea? In other words, cash flow forecasts, we deal with fact. We deal with absolute commitment. If it's not a fact, please don't put it in, because you can see what would happen if all of a sudden that £20,000 uplift didn't happen in August, in September, in October, and then your quaff didn't kick in either, and you were £10,000 down there. That's a combination £70,000. Your net cash balance, therefore, by October would be in the minus. Does this make sense? Yeah. You might therefore decide, crikey, okay, if that's going to happen and we're not certain of it, there's no way I'm committing to that upgraded digital electronic patient management system in July. Is that okay with everybody? So my begging to you all is, if you're going to do cash flow analyses, and I would hope that you are all doing cash flow analyses, never ever put in there stuff that is a hoped for. You only deal in fact-based stuff, particularly in an environment of uncertainty. Okay, does anybody have any questions at this stage? Because the next thing I want to do is talk to you about the idea of, if you are going to grow and you need to squeeze the assets that you have, then make sure that the growth is worth the squeeze. I don't want to dwell on that. And make sure that you've got irons in the fire. Let's talk about growth. Okay. How do you create an environment? If you're worried about the future from a perspective of uncertainty, sitting there hopelessly behind a desk without having contingency plans is a horrible place to put yourself. Be familiar with the expression control the controllables. And I think the most important thing any of you could do is have irons in the fire, whereby at least you feel that you've got some kind of control, whereby you can present synopses to your partners, to your staff, whereby if problems start to emerge, you are seen to be doing something about them. So I thought it might be interesting just to have a bit of a conversation catalyst around what can you do if you want to grow your practice, or if you want to insulate yourselves from the effect of uncertainty. What might you do? And I came up with one or two ideas. I hope these make sense to you. I thought, well, you could renegotiate your contract. You could talk about local change situations, such as we discussed with the new estate being built on the edge of town. Maybe you go from GMS to PMS or something like that. But have those conversations with your ICB in particular. Make sure that you're lining things up where you don't just feel powerless should those contract numbers not come through. Okay. And if you remember what we were talking about right at the beginning of today's webinar, we're talking about people not getting budgets confirmed until July, September, even March for the existing financial year. Getting that contract negotiations going with your ICB at an early stage is a really important idea, I would suggest. I could suggest maybe you think about, if you're not already opted into things, well, what prevents you from doing so? Is it just sentiment? Are there practical reasons why you're not into out of hours support, additional services, enhanced and local services? Why aren't you doing that stuff? Could you do that stuff? What would it take for you to be able to negotiate that with the ICB and insulate yourself from the financial rockiness that you might otherwise be looking at? You might also look at, is there a possibility to acquire a neighbouring practice, merge the back office systems of both of them, and figure out how you make cost savings in that regard through that kind of merger activity? And by the way, all of the information we're getting at the moment tells us, for example, that we're going to see ICB mergers taking place. We expect the number of ICBs to drop to around 20 in England. And you can imagine, one of the, whether you agree with it or not, the idea that the cost savings that will result in back office systems, corporate support functions, etc., should be obvious. I'm not even going to cutting non-core discretionary expenditure. You should have a plan for all of that, should you need to do it. If you fear that one of those uplifts in contract negotiations absolutely may not happen, have your contingency plan for cutting non-core discretionary expenditure standing by. I would always advocate absolutely transparent data measurement so that you, your partners, and your staff see in really clear weekly and monthly measurements exactly where you are in respect of what you were trying to deliver upon. And I would encourage you to work with your people to develop a growth plan with your team. So again, have some facts and figures, have some contingencies, have some responsibilities so that you are all agreed what we do if. Yeah, that's as far as I can develop. That's as far as you may have a whole heap of other things. I'm just really interested. Could you just raise your hand if you already have a contingency plan or a growth plan within your practice? I am not seeing any hands go up. Is that because I'm just genuinely interested here? You can pop it in the chat if you like. Is that because you've never felt inclined to do it, or is there some other reason that's preventing you from doing so? Would anybody like to comment? As I say, I'm monitoring the chat, so you can pop it in there if you like. Okay. Well, I'm guessing from that you haven't got contingency plans. You haven't necessarily got growth plans agreed with your partners and so on. So Amanda says we have some backup plans. So is that backup to systems, or is that financial backup, process backup, pathway backup, relationship backup if specific things don't come in as you are forecasting? Financial. Okay, that's important. So as far as I can tell from this, Amanda's the only one who's got some kind of laid plan ready for if something goes awry in respect of, in particular, your budgeting or something of that nature. Okay, interesting. All right, well, look, I've come in pretty much bang on the 40-minute mark. So I'm now going to invite anybody to put in questions. I will put up, if I may, my contact details. I did say to you right at the very beginning of this that if any of you would like a confidential discussion with me to discuss specific issues that you may be worried about within your practice, either financial or otherwise, please, I'm more than happy to be a confidential sounding board and just discuss that with you. And often, you know, a problem shared is a problem halved. I'm not pretending I can solve all of your issues, but at least it might be nice to have somebody independent and confidential to talk to about them. Okay. Kieran, shall I put up the remainder of the slides that you wanted here, or shall we wait till after we've done the Q&A?
Yes, please, John. If I, yeah, I'll run through my section, and then, yeah, it'll give everyone a little bit of time then to ask some questions in the chat. So thank you, John.
Okay.
A very
I'm going to stop
informative.
sharing for a moment and then go back to sharing, but do it on a different basis for Kieran. There you go.
Thank you, John. Yeah, like I said, a very informative and thought-provoking session. I'm sure everyone on the call will agree. As John mentioned, if you do have a question that you've not yet submitted, please enter it in the chat box and we'll get through as many questions as time allows. And yeah, I'm pleased to confirm that we will be delivering more education throughout the year. So please keep an eye out on our social media and webinar registration page. I'll pop the link in the chat in a second. This will be at wms.co.uk/webinar. And yet, as an attendee of this session, we'll also notify you of any future events. Really excited. This is obviously the first session of our new practice support series, and our next one will take place on Tuesday, the 20th of May, where we will be joined with Claire Mould, talking about managing me in an age of us. So from a Williams Medical perspective, I'd just like to reiterate, as one of the leading partners for healthcare professionals in primary care, we are dedicated to supporting your everyday, both from a service perspective and also through added value and education, as we've been able to deliver in partnership with John and the IHCM today. Our offering spans across numerous medical services, along with thousands of products in our disposables, pharmaceutical and equipment categories. We're very proud of our excellent rating on Trustpilot. And yeah, just want to reiterate that we're here to support you, to help you save time and also save effort with our omni-channel shopping experience. Next slide, please, John. There we go. And yeah, I'd just like to remind everyone on the call that you can earn rewards every time you shop with Williams Medical and Williams Plus. This is our new reward scheme, which we launched sort of 6 months ago at Williams Medical. You can find out more about the eligibility and enroll by visiting wms.co.uk/Williams Plus. And yeah, before I bring the session to a close, I'll just double check the chat. We've got a message from Amanda. Thank you. Thank you. Nice praise there for John.
Thank you, Amanda.
And yeah, once everyone, give them a bit of time to ask more questions. But yeah, to bring the session to a close, I guess, once again, thank you, John. Thank you all for joining us today. From our perspective, we will be following up with resources over the coming days. So please don't hesitate to contact us if you need any support. So I'll just give everyone a little bit more time. I'm assuming there's no further questions.
Oh, that's a great observation, Sergio. Thank you. So, yeah, how do you tackle if all of your GP partners are laggards? How do we deal with that? So I would personally, we could do another. If you wanted us to do another webinar, we could do one on how to have difficult conversations and how to give feedback to people, etc. It is a process-driven piece of activity. So I would use an EESC model, which stands for example, effect, silence, and then change or continue. I'd be looking through that process to give them an example of their behavior. I would describe the effect to them that has on the practice and the people that we serve. I would then be quiet to allow them to come back with any comment they may have. And then I'd try to move to I would really appreciate if we could change you or change your approach in order to then come on board and better support the rest of the team. It's a difficult job to carry out. There are processes, as I say, and pathways I'd be delighted to share with you, Sergio. If you feel that you've got a situation at the moment in your own practice where you'd like a bit of support for that, please contact me. I'd be very happy to help you with that. It's often one of those where you've just got to figure out what's going on for them, whereby they don't feel able to support what you're asking them to do. And in my experience, there's always a reason that is not entirely rational to do with somebody's lack of willingness to support what everybody else is choosing to do. And maybe you just got to pick that off with them independently, individually, and try to tackle that directly with them. It's not easy, and without a more precise scenario, Serge, it's kind of difficult for me to go any further, but there are models that I would be happy to share with you if you'd be interested. So, can I just add one more point, Sergio? I've just read your point again. If you think about it, if you're asking somebody to change from doing things one way to doing things another way, and that undermines all the skills that that person has developed over many, many years, so that they feel a level of competence and confidence and power to do with that build-up of skills over many years, and then you're taking that away. If you can imagine if that was you, you would feel very threatened by that process as well. So it's a matter of helping people to feel confident that they're going to be supported and helped, and that actually they will maintain their current status within the organization. Perhaps that's often at the root of that kind of a scenario. I hope that's helpful. Thank you, Sergio. Okay, well, we don't seem to be getting any more questions, Kieran, so I'm going to hand on to you for the last thing. That is the contact details for Williams Medical Supplies, and I'll hand on to Kieran to wrap this up then.
Yeah, so thank you, John. Yeah, and just to bring the session to a close, once again, thank you Thank you everyone for joining us today. As I said, we'll follow up with some resources over the coming days. But yeah, we look forward to seeing you on more webinars, including the next events in our practice support series. Yeah, these will take place at various times throughout the year, but I popped the link in the chat. Yeah, and we look forward to seeing you again. So enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the sunshine. Thank you all.